All right, buckle up, because today's deep dive is going to make your head spin.
That's right. This isn't just a routine campaign finance violation.
Exactly, and it all revolves around this thing called NYC's Matching Funds Program.
Right. The program incentivizes candidates to seek out smaller donations from regular folks.
So in theory, it makes elections more about grassroots support and less about who has the deepest pockets.
Precisely. But here's where things get murky.
Okay, so walk us through this.
Well, imagine this. The more small dollar donations you rack up, the more public matching funds you unlock.
You're talking about those straw donor schemes we've been hearing about.
Exactly. Imagine a scenario where a wealthy individual or a corporation, barred from donating directly, funnels money through employees or associates.
And the indictment is saying this is what Adams and his team are accused of doing.
That's right. They're accused of using a network of straw donors to inflate their small dollar donations, which, in turn, allegedly boosted their public matching funds.
So they're accused of gaming the system, using public funds intended to empower ordinary New Yorkers to potentially further their own ambitions.
And it's not just about the money itself. This alleged scheme, if proven true, undermines the very spirit of fair elections.
And the plot thickens when we bring in the international intrigue.
That's right. The indictment details this remarkably close relationship between Adams and certain figures at the Turkish Consulate General in New York City.
Okay, so set the stage for us.
The indictment points to a Turkish official, a high-ranking individual within the Turkish diplomatic circle in New York, as a central figure.
And we're not talking about a complimentary Turkish delight basket here.
We're talking tens of thousands of dollars worth of travel and hospitality, much of it arranged through Turkish Airlines, which, as you know, has close ties to the Turkish government.
So there are clear links to the Turkish government itself, which raises some red flags.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It certainly is. Why would they go to such lengths for, a mayor in New York City? And that brings us to the heart of this alleged quid pro quo.
You mentioned expecting favors in return.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of favors are we talking about here? This is where things start to feel like a political thriller.
Well, the indictment alleges that in exchange for these extravagant perks, Adams was expected to use his influence to benefit the Turkish consulate, even if it meant bending the rules.
Okay, I need a specific example here. Like, what kind of favors are we talking about?
One incident really stands out. It involves this massive 36-story skyscraper intended to be the Turkish consulate's new headquarters.
Okay.
They were on a tight deadline to get this building open in time for a visit from the Turkish president who was scheduled to formally open it.
So the pressure was on. But what does that have to do with Mayor Adams?
Well, it seems the building hadn't passed its crucial fire safety inspections, and the FDNY was refusing to issue a temporary certificate of occupancy.
Which is a pretty big deal. You can't just have a skyscraper full of people without ensuring it meets safety standards.
Exactly. But the Turkish consulate was adamant about meeting that deadline, and that's when they allegedly leaned on Adams to intervene.
Hold on. You're saying they went to the then mayoral candidate to pressure the FDNY. That's quite a leap.
It certainly raises eyebrows. According to the indictment, Adams, after allegedly receiving these lavish trips and favors, contacted the FDNY commissioner directly, even going over the head of the fire prevention chief.
And what happened? Did the FDNY cave?
The indictment alleges that the fire prevention chief was explicitly told he'd lose his job if he didn't approve the building.
Wow. If this is true, we're not just talking about a conflict of interest. We're talking about a potential abuse of power. With potentially life-threatening consequences.
Mm-hmm.
This building wasn't some small office. It was a massive skyscraper.
It's a chilling thought, and it gets to the heart of why these allegations are so serious. This isn't just about political maneuvering. It's about public safety, the integrity of our institutions, and whether those in power are serving the people or their own interest.
It's a stark reminder that these aren't just abstract political scandals we're talking about. They have real-world implications that hit close to home for every New Yorker.
Precisely. And the indictment suggests this wasn't an isolated incident. There are numerous other examples of this alleged pay-to-play culture where individuals and businesses with ties to the Turkish community allegedly funneled contributions to Adams's campaign with the expectation of favors down the line.
So it wasn't just about getting elected. It was about cashing in on that power once in office.
Mm-hmm.
This is where those straw donor schemes come back into play, right?
Absolutely. The indictment details how several individuals with close ties to the Turkish consulate allegedly used straw donors to disguise the true source of campaign contributions.
Okay, give me an example. I want to understand how this actually worked.
Take Businessman 5. He's a prominent member of New York City's Turkish community and owns a construction company. The indictment alleges that he hosted a fundraiser for Adams in 2021, but it was orchestrated in a way to circumvent those campaign finance regulations.
What do you mean orchestrated?
Well, instead of donating directly, which would have a limit, he allegedly provided his employees with company money to donate to the campaign,
Huh.
each receiving $1,250 and subsequently contributing that exact amount to Adams's campaign.
Talk about a coincidence. It seems pretty transparent, doesn't it?
There's more. The indictment suggests that this Turkish official we've been discussing was also involved in this arrangement, encouraging businessman 5 to support Adams and potentially even supplying some of those funds.
So it wasn't just about skirting campaign finance laws. It was also about potentially disguising the influence of foreign entities in our elections.
And remember how the matching funds program works. The indictment alleges that the Adams campaign submitted these straw donations for matching funds. So not only were they allegedly accepting potentially illicit contributions, but they were then using those to access even more public funds.
It's like a double whammy of alleged wrongdoing, potentially undermining the very system designed to level the playing field and empower everyday New Yorkers.
And unfortunately, this Businessman 5 case wasn't an isolated incident. The indictment outlines a pattern of similar behavior with other individuals and businesses, all seemingly promised influence and access in return for their support.
This paints a pretty troubling picture of how business might have been conducted, both during the campaign and once Adams took office.
It certainly raises concerns about whether decisions were being made in the best interest of the city or if personal gain and favors played a role.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, how much of this is actually, going on that we don't even know about.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, it's like the whole thing kind of operates under this assumption that, everything's above board, and then something like this comes out, and it's like, whoa.
Right, exactly.
How much of this is just, the tip of the iceberg?
And for folks who might be listening thinking like, oh, this is just how politics works, or, what can you do?
Right.
What would you say to that?
I would say it's easy to become cynical, right? Especially when you see this kind of stuff happening. But I think it's really important to remember that, we deserve better and we should demand better from our elected officials. And I think this case really highlights the need for, stronger campaign finance reform.
Absolutely.
Greater transparency, stricter enforcement of the rules, because ultimately, we want a system where everybody has a fair shot and it doesn't feel like it's rigged in favor of those with the deepest pockets or the most powerful connections.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about one mayor or one election cycle. It's about the very principles of fairness and transparency that we say we believe in as a society.
Exactly.
So to our listeners out there, what can we do? I mean, what are some concrete steps that that people can take to be more engaged, to hold our elected officials accountable, to make sure that these kinds of things are less likely to happen in the future?
I think, first and foremost, being informed, right? Like we've been saying, paying attention to what's happening, following the news, following these cases. But then beyond that, getting involved, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's, contacting your elected representatives, attending city council meetings, just making your voice heard and letting them know that you're paying attention and that you care about these issues.
And it's not just about complaining, right? It's about, supporting organizations, supporting candidates who you believe are, actually fighting for these values of transparency and accountability.
Absolutely.
Because it's to take a collective effort to really create lasting change.
Exactly. And I think, one other thing I'd add is, don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, if something don't seem right, if you see something, say something. Because, oftentimes these things happen because people are afraid to speak up or they think that their voice doesn't matter.
Right. It's like that old saying, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a real eye-opener. It's a reminder that, even in a city as big and complex as New York, these issues of power and influence, they touch all of our lives in ways that we might not always realize.
Absolutely.
So it's up to all of us to stay vigilant and keep fighting for a more transparent and accountable government.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been The Deep Dive. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that matters. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.